So, what and in terms of food, have you seen any significant radiated food around that is out in the market? Do people in Safecast or people around here detect like how much radiation is found in food or in
We've
fish?
we've been testing food, especially rice and other vegetables that are grown in Chiba, in outside of Fukushima, in Fukushima, and unfortunately, we found a very wide range of levels of contamination. We've seen rice that was grown in quite contaminated areas in Fukushima that had almost no cesium in it. Somehow, the chemistry of the way the soil works and the way the plants pick it up doesn't seem to make it very predictable. We've gotten rice from one field that was contaminated in about 50,000 becquerels per square meter, and the rice had 290 becquerels per kilogram of cesium contamination in it. Other rice from an adjacent field, or just a few kilometers away, that had similar contamination levels had less than 10 becquerels per kilogram in it. So it's difficult to say where something is going to be contaminated. We haven't seen anything. I have not measured any food or seen measurements of food that exceeded the the international standards, the ones put out by the ICRP. They have a guideline for 1,000 becquerels per kilogram for staple food consumption. The standard in Japan last year has been 500 becquerels per kilogram, and it's been very rare to find foods that are above that. There have been some found that I've seen reported in the news. Nothing we've tested has exceeded 300 becquerels per kilogram, and almost everything we've tested it has been undetectable amounts, even in things coming from Fukushima. Things that I've tested personally, we've found in spinach and shiso and a couple other dark leafy vegetables. Those are the things we've found the highest contamination in from food plants that are grown commonly in Japan. Rice, most rice is completely safe to eat, even from Fukushima. We have found some that was contaminated. As I said, nothing over 300 becquerels per kilogram. Next month, Japan's going to lower their standard to 100 becquerels per kilogram, so that food would not be able to be sold in the market. But it's contaminated. It's not unsafe to eat if you were starving, but being an affluent country, we can afford to ignore that food, discard it, and eat food that doesn't have that contamination.
So for like food normally in the other parts of the world, I know that there are some foods that are higher in radiation, like probably bananas.
Well, the most common radiation that humans are exposed to comes from potassium-40, which is a small fraction of all the potassium in the world. So a typical person has, an adult has about 4,000 to 5,000 becquerels total in their body of potassium-40 at any given time. Okay, when you eat a banana, that's got potassium in it, so it's going to be slightly radioactive. It doesn't really give you any extra dose because the potassium that you get from the banana replaces potassium that was already in your body, so your dosage is not going up from that. Some foods have very high radiation content, relatively speaking. Some nuts are in the 400 to 500 becquerels per kilogram range, again from potassium-40. We found some seaweed, some kombu, that was harvested a few months ago north of the Fukushima plant. And since the flow of the Pacific is northbound from there, we were very concerned to see what was in it. We tested it with a Geiger counter. It was clearly active. I mean, even from a few inches away, you could tell that there was a lot of activity coming from it. We sent it to a laboratory to determine what the level of activity and what it was from. It was almost 5,000 becquerels per kilogram, all of it natural from potassium-40. Now, it was a dried seaweed, so it had been greatly concentrated by removing the water. If it were reconstituted, it probably would have been still in the several hundred becquerels per kilogram it wasn't contaminated. There was several hundred becquerels per kilogram of activity, but this was natural potassium-40 that's as far as we know in all seaweed of that type, and always has been.
So have you tested other kinds of seaweed from like Korea or other parts of the world?
We've tested some seaweed products, wakame, and some things that are in the store, and we found no cesium contamination in those at all. But of course, they contain easily measurable amounts of potassium-40.
And the Fukushima plant did not really release potassium-40.
There was no potassium-40 released from Fukushima. Potassium-40 is a natural isotope. It's the most common isotope that irradiates natural life in the environment. That, and along with some of the other, carbon-14 and some of they're considered natural radiation. Some people tend to think that, well, if it's natural background radiation, if it's always been there, they don't worry about it because they think it's not harmful. I definitely do not agree with that. To me, radiation is radiation. The gamma rays that come off of potassium-40 are twice as energetic as the gamma rays coming off of cesium. And there's some debate as to whether they're twice as harmful or equally harmful. They're there. I'm sure they're not less harmful just because they're natural.
So it would be safe to say that if I get, same seaweed from Korea, it's roughly the same kind of radiation because
if it's the same species, I would guess it would have the same level of radioactivity from natural sources. And who knows, maybe cancer is an extremely important cause of death in the human population. What's to say that a lot of those cases aren't caused by the natural radiation that's in our lives all the time?
Then what kind of food are probably at high risk, or is there even food that are riskier because
Unfortunately, there is a very good correlation between foods that are generally considered nutritious and contamination from up in Fukushima. Foods like daikon, radishes that they tend to be mostly water and the flesh is very white. They don't pick up many minerals when they grow, and so they don't pick up the cesium either. Dark leaf plants like spinach and they generally tend to be more nutritious because they tend to collect more minerals in their leaves, and that's what we need for vitamins. They also tend to apparently concentrate the cesium if it's present in the environment.
So are there like much significant? So let's say just food in Japan in general, not even talk about Fukushima region. There are maybe strawberries in Ishinomaki. Is it more? Have you measured like higher radiation in those strawberries, or even like some other foods?
We haven't found any contamination in strawberries. In the few samples of strawberries we've seen tested, there was no detectable contamination whatsoever. Now, partly that's because they're a fruit that maybe doesn't concentrate it. They tend to be grown indoors or at least under plastic in Japan. That we found nothing in strawberries or in any of those things. There has been some contamination found in persimmons from Fukushima. We tested some of those that were levels, but again, it's really very exceptional, even in foods coming from Fukushima, to find levels that are above the guidelines for food safety. Yes, there is contamination in there, but it's generally very small amounts.